So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Keith. I was actually my Uncle John's ring bearer. So, back then, that was 33 years ago. And I just thought he was the coolest guy. I was just so excited to be part of that ceremony. See, my Aunt Lynn and my Uncle John, they took me on a vacation. We were in a cabin. I don't remember exactly where. In Maine. What stuck with me was just the way they acted together, the way that they laughed at the table, the way they cracked jokes, the friends that they had coming to that house. I tasted food I never tasted before. They introduced me to sushi. They had friends with accents. They did. It just gave me a different understanding of the adult world that was just so beneficial for me. Everything about that experience was good. Everybody here that shared a table with them understands what I mean by that, and they were consistent with it the entire time. So after that, when I went home, and my grandfather would ask me at the table, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up, Keith? And say, I want to be a scientist. I want to be a scientist. I didn't know what a scientist was. I knew that there was a white lab coat. I knew that there were beakers and test tubes and crazy hair. Believe it or not, Uncle John did have that for a while there. It was brief. But when I said I wanted to be a scientist, I was saying, I want to be like my Uncle John. I want to be my Uncle John. I have a baby boy. He's beautiful, he's smart, like my wife. And when we found out that we were going to have a child, the first thing we did is we found the nursery. And then when we found out we were going to have a boy, we were excited about names. Just throwing names out there. What's in a name? I know there's something, because when I said Rocky, let's call him Rocky. Monica was like the raccoon? No, how about John? After your grandfather, after your uncle. And I teared up. I was like, you would do that for me? You'd do that? She goes, no, I would do that for the baby. Do that for our boy. I think of those men. I think of my Uncle John specifically. Who wouldn't want that for their child, to keep a beginner's eye? Who wouldn't want their child to find beauty in everything, no matter how small it was, no matter how enormous it was? Who wouldn't want their child to take methodical care in all of their work, to speak deliberately and always with love? Who wouldn't want their child to inspire, to make so many people proud. That's what I've heard from every single person that I've talked to today, and that was a lot. To filter the universe through that mind. Who wouldn't want that? So I have a baby boy named John. He's 9 months. He just got his second tooth. And, when you bring my Uncle John up in conversation, you don't just bring him up. Nobody just says, John, Richie. There's a formula. There's a parenthetical, and it's followed by an accomplishment. And what it equates to is the potential for many great conversations. Here's an example. I have this Uncle John, just the kindest, nicest man. Brilliant. He's been studying mushrooms. He actually recently just came in from Amsterdam, where he was learning with Michelin star chefs. Well, anyways, he figured out how to plant white figs outside in partial shade and get them to bloom in zone 5. That's how you talk about my Uncle John. It's like announcing a boxing match. And that's how I want to start today's ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to celebrate the top contender, a true Renaissance man who embodies kindness, brilliance, and love, a chef who'd leave food critics speechless, a devoted father who raised his children with love and care, a father who stood by his partner through thick and thin, a scientist who's dedicated his life to helping others, a boss who's inspired and uplifted his employees, and above all, a kind man, radiating positivity and compassion, a genius in the truest sense, and master of the shaded garden. John, the kind heart Richie. And the first person to speak about him today is going to be his sister and my mother, Carol.
So that's my son. And on top of it, Johnny is my brother. I mean, really, how lucky can a person be, right? So, as you know now, my name is Carol. I'm his sister. I'm from Massachusetts. If you haven't figured that out yet, you will by the time I say a few more things. I've had you have to wait just a second because I can't see what I'm writing. Okay, there we go. I had an opportunity to meet some of you while visiting John during this terrible illness, and I have to say your kind words and stories have been very heartwarming. John was a pretty humble guy. He didn't speak much about himself or his work. The only way I ever heard if he was doing something interesting was by accident or if Lynn told me. Once during a phone call while we were talking about, of all things, the weather, I mentioned how significantly smoke from the California wildfires had affected the skies in Boston. Johnny responded, yeah, by the way, I'm the only one who can call him Johnny. Yeah, when I was in Los Angeles, the smoke was so thick, the day looked like night. When I asked him why he was in Los Angeles, he told me he was there to take an episode of The Doctors, the TV show, right? He was going to speak about the significance of glutathione as an antioxidant and the possible benefits of GSH supplementation. Now, he never would have told me that if I hadn't have asked. So I, in turn, found when the episodes were going to be aired. I told everyone I know, including a lady that I was having a conversation with at the checkout line in the grocery store, that my wicked cool brother was going to be on TV. More recently, Lynn sent me a link to a radio interview John taped with RNZ, New England's version of NPR, I think. New Zealand, yes. He spoke about the preventive role of mushrooms against cancer. I bookmarked this, by the way, if anyone wants to listen to it. This interview was classic John. His voice was calm and steady. He was friendly, enthusiastic, approachable. The information was clear and interesting. After listening to it, I called him to tell him how great he was again. And typical of John, he's always willing to share the spotlight. He says to me, yes, I thank the interviewer for asking such great questions. Right? As I mentioned earlier, while I visited John during his illness, I was fortunate to meet some of you who see him regularly. Many spoke of how brilliant he was, how highly respected he was in his field. Again today, I've heard this a bazillion times. It's awesome. All spoke of what a wonderful person he was, kind and caring, patient and fair. One former colleague spoke of how his mentorship had changed the trajectory of her career, in fact, her life. Others touted his leadership skills and his work ethic. On the Caring Bridge website that was set up during John's illness, a former co-worker wrote that he and his colleagues had a nickname for John. They called him JJWB, or John the Wonder Boss. Because he was fair, hardworking, and generous. How cool is that, right? This is my brother, right? So what can I tell you about my dear brother that you don't already know? How will I remember him? I can tell you, he's always been this way. He was born sweet, kind, caring, and helpful. I remember him at the age of 4, David, running into the backyard wearing feety pajamas and carrying a ruler. He was going to protect our mother from the neighbor's cow who had escaped and was now peering at her through the bathroom window. He was a curious and funny guy and a little mischievous. He and my cousin Cindy were always getting in trouble for wading in the brook at the edge of our yard. They'd catch minnows and frogs, snakes, and other gooey, slimy thing that was in there. As you can tell probably by the way I'm saying this, I was not into the gooey, slimy stuff. Friends that he played football with in the field next to our yard are still his friends today. This group of grade school buddies have remained close, even vacationed together each summer with their families throughout their lives. How often does that happen? I remember playing board games with John in the attic. We played chess until he consistently started to beat me, and then we switched to cribbage where I'd have more of a chance. He was always a good son, loving and caring. Despite the long distance, he remained devoted and present in our parents' lives until they both passed away. When he was young, he hunted and fished with my father. Helped him in the garden, of course, he golfed. My father loved to golf. He and my mother bonded in the kitchen. They both loved food. My mother loved to cook. Johnny loved to eat. Food remained important to him both personally and professionally for his entire life. When you went to visit John and his family, he loved nothing more than to cook. For breakfast, he would make bacon and eggs for my husband Ed. If Nick wanted pancakes, he'd make pancakes. And then when Marina wanted waffles, well, he would happily make waffles too. He made all the Italian specialties, polenta and sausage, linguine and clam sauce, and on Christmas he would do the 7 fish. That's a lot of work. John was happy to do it, shuffling and dancing around the kitchen, and like my mother, when he cooked, he sang. And like my mother, when he sang terrible. He threw out these little food quips like, let us eat salad. I relish the thought. Isn't it past your bedtime? Right? He loved and he was proud of his family. He would speak of how from a very young age, Nick understood everything mechanical. He could fix anything. Of Marina, he said he would never worry, that she could accomplish anything she put her mind to. And anyone who knew John and Lynn together knew their relationship was aligned with the universe. They were best friends. They were soulmates. He may have been called John the Wonder Boss, but he was also John the Wonder Brother, the Wonder Son, the Wonder Friend, the Wonder Father, the Wonder Husband. He was John the Wonder Man. John accomplished a lot in his career that he was certainly proud of, but he didn't care to talk about that. But people in his life mattered more. His friends, his colleagues, and of course his family were his real priority. How he treated all of us was most important, and that's how he lived his life, and that's what makes him the Wonder Man, and that's what I'll remember about my brother. Thank you. He has the same friends since his childhood, and one of them is here, and one of them is going to speak about him next, Michael Azes.
Hi, my name's Michael Aziz, and John was my best friend for more than 50 years. We were Cub Scouts together, and it just grew from there. We played a lot of basketball together, as well as that more famous sport, sumo Nerf water polo. After our knees gave out, it was just badminton. Once we started having kids, we spent many summer vacations together on Cape Cod, and my family, Michelle, Adele, Kaitlin, and Mimi, grew very close to John, Lynn, Nick, and Raymond. John and I would go wading in the Brewster Flats, finding crabs and razor clams, taking the baby shrimp while gnarding our bare feet. The kids might collect enough snails for John to incorporate into some masterpiece of a banquet. And every evening was a banquet because John had a special gift as a chef, and we were the beneficiaries. Many of you know exactly what I mean. Because we both had careers in scientific research and teaching, we could relate to each other in a special way. It was easy to appreciate each other's trials, tribulations, accomplishments, and triumphs. The skill and commitment with which John navigated the escape of his research group to Penn State from the unethical management at the American Health Foundation was truly heroic. And there are people still here, still pushing the frontiers of knowledge because of John and his dedication. 4 years ago, we got our first and only chance to attend the same scientific conference and attend each other's presentations. I was blown away seeing what a thorough and insightful job John and his team had done in tracking down and understanding what happens pathologically and biochemically when white mice are subjected to vaping. And during the conference, he beat me in an arcade basketball. No knees, all wrist. Right after John's presentation was a far shallower presentation from another university that had received a certain big chunk of funding instead of John. It was such stark evidence that sometimes there's no justice. That we are here today is more such evidence. That no justice when such a gem of a human being is taken from us, when he still had the capacity to contribute so much and to enjoy life so fully as he always did. I admired so many things about John. His work-life balance of scientific impact, being with and caring for family and friends, athletics, and you've heard about his cooking. But especially I admire John's people skills. When I find myself about to engage in a difficult conversation, on a good day, I ask myself, how will John approach this? With kindness, empathy, patience, respect, and a little humor. And so John is my good angel on my right shoulder. I'll try to navigate through a disagreement without the conversation turning strident and angry. I'm here today to say how much John's friendship meant to me and how profoundly I feel the loss. But I also know how deeply each of you cared about him because he was such a special human being. And to know John was to love him. To paraphrase Prophet by Khalil Gibran, the depth of our sorrow reflects the height of our joy from having had John in our lives. John, I miss you so much, and I'll always remember you.
Hi, I'm Mike Zeller, Lynn's brother. We're here from that side of the family. But first I want to tell you all how much your attention and love let's face it, the last few months have been pretty hard. And your meals, your your text messages, your visits, your random phone calls, whatever. They were a real help to Lynn and our family. You were also a huge support to me and my brothers, who worry about Lynn collectively almost as much as she worries about us individually. She is fine, and she has thanked you all individually, but the brothers, I think, have not thanked you, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for all of your support, because your support went far beyond just the family. I'm supposed to be speaking on behalf of my sister, but I suspect she didn't want to talk today. But I really can't do that. Lynn, nobody knew John better than Lynn. Let's face it, collectively, we probably didn't know John as well. 33 years of marriage. 33. I'm not saying that my sister is old, but they were very much an old married couple. In the best possible way, like old married couples, they have this silent communication, they know what each other's thinking or wanting. And that was really apparent in the last couple of months when John couldn't really speak. So many times I saw, her look, that they would look deep into each other's eyes for, 20 seconds or so, and she would stand up and say, "John wants chicken soup." Like decisive, there was no sound, there was no body movement. It's like, what? Oh, okay. And she was right, always. The other problem I'm having is that I didn't know John, certainly not as well as Mike or many of you. I didn't work with him. I didn't grow up with him. I don't even like to play basketball. But in many years of family get-togethers and the many meals we shared, it was pretty easy to spot this guy as kind, he's funny, he's sincere, he's, a caring father. He's incredibly brilliant. What struck me, though, about John mostly was that he was amazingly quiet for a guy who was so knowledgeable about so many things and opinionated, and yet always wanted to hear what I was doing or what I thought about something. He had, I knew that he was a huge fan of all Boston sports teams, and I say that only to say that the guy did have his faults. I think when we did get together, the reason, as much as I love John, when we got together, Lynn was there, and, Lynn and I like to talk. We talk until we run out of words. We talk on the phone pretty regularly, we get together fairly often, and so I didn't have the opportunity really to spend time with John because I was talking to my sister. In 33 years of living with John, she never once spoke an unkind word. I thought that was remarkable. I mean, you're living with someone for 33 years. You don't have anything to complain about? I mean, my sister's no saint. Let me tell you. Not easy. So, that is one hell of a guy. He was, and that's how I know, through that silence, that he was a wonderful, loving husband. Far better than she probably deserved. That's but wonderful. I know that probably many of you feel traumatized by the way John died. We all grieve. We grieve because of the loss. I think, Mike, you said, the promises of all of the fun times that we were looking forward to sharing with John. But we grieve, in any loss like that. This grief is a little bit different in that the way he was taken in very much still the prime of his life was horrid, was gruesome. We all know, all right? Don't want to belabor that point. But I wanted to share with you a conversation that I had with my sister just a couple of weeks ago that I think might help. It helped me. Hopefully it'll help you. We were sitting in the kitchen, and she said, Mike, John and I have had a lot of fun. And I was like, 32 years of marriage, I hope that's fun. And I said, no, I mean, since the diagnosis. And it just struck me like, the last 4 months, those, and my immediate reaction was, I wonder what drug she's taking. But then it dawned on me that she was serious. Between the medications and the crying jags and the trips to the hospital, they spent a lot of time, just the two of them. And like any old married couple, the fun is just being together. And for once, she didn't have to share him with his job. He,
these last 4 months too. Trying to think of the right thing to say. My great grandmother died. I was trying to figure out this earlier today with my cousin David. About 20 years ago, he spoke at her funeral, and that he was just so soft spoken. He was so careful with his words, so deliberate. The way that he opened up that ceremony, he said, have you ever heard the phrase, there wasn't a bad bone in one's body? He goes, she fit that to the T. And he said, if you knew my Aunt Lynn, if you knew, not that old. If you knew, I'm just looking at you. If you knew my great grandmother, she had a lot to complain about, and she didn't. She always chose kindness. She always chose goodness. She always was happy to see other people happy. And he said that in her absence, it was up to us. It was our duty and our obligation to be kinder people. to make up for her loss. And I was thinking about those words, and implicitly he was also saying to complain less. And I think those are the words that I needed then, and those are the words I need now, too. I think it's safe to say that my Uncle John, he followed his word. I think he worked overtime. I think he did extra shifts. I think he put in extra goodness for the rest of us. I'm sure of that. And I speak to people that have worked with him for so many years, that is very, very clear that he is an incredibly hard worker, but for the most part, he is going to be remembered for his sheer goodness. Sheer goodness. And it's tough to tell where that goodness came from. If it was guiding him, if he was generating it, if it was both. The way back from Pennsylvania last week, Anne Marie Testamata, she stepped in my house and she just pointed at a book on my bookshelf for no reason. It was How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. And in that book, he's fascinated with the possibility that a subatomic particle can exist simultaneous in two places. And I think such was my Uncle John's goodness, that it just could not be measured. It came behind him in every room, behind every gesture, and like his cooking, there was always extra for guests, there was always extra for the next day, even if he couldn't enjoy it. And like his work, he was just happy to contribute, but to contribute to other people's joy. So the next speakers are going to be people that have worked with my Uncle John, people who have been close friends with my Uncle John for many, 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 many years, and I'm so eager to hear their stories. I'd like to invite up Josh Muscat, followed by Tom Spratt, followed by Neil Trushin. Josh Muscat, you're up. Thank you.
So I'd like to offer my appreciation to the Richie family for inviting me to speak here today. And Heath. I've known John for 30 years, actually, before we moved to Hershey, Pennsylvania together, back at the American Health Foundation in New York City. We both came out of graduate school pretty much the same time. John had just finished his PhD. I just finished my master's degree. John was in the Valhalla Laboratories, and I was in the New York City office. We had the opportunity to meet on occasion, but almost the first time I met John, I knew that this guy was something special, as did everybody else in the American Health Foundation. And I just want to reiterate what everyone else has said here, is John was like the most brilliant guy I've ever known. It was just remarkable. And you go into his room, you sit down, and he just wouldn't stop talking. And after a while, I stopped listening because I thought, how does this guy know all these things? Like, this is like unbelievable. You know? And no matter what the topic was, he just had this incredible depth of knowledge, a depth and ability to synthesize different things together and find solutions. Just a remarkable thing. But as brilliant as he was, I like to reiterate, his family's been saying that's actually outshone by his generosity. Most generous person I've ever known. And you can see that at work. I've had, for the last 20 years, I've sat next to John in adjacent offices. And there would be a line out the door. Everybody wanted a piece of John because he was going to solve the problems. He was coming up with scientific answers. He knew what to do. He could see everything. And he could almost instantaneously solve the problems, understand the directions that he need to go. As a colleague, as a mentor, as a teacher, just remarkable. So huge line outside John's door, students and other faculty members, other people who work at Penn State. So our room's right next to each other. My door's open and his door's open. I can see everybody lining up. I used to sit there thinking, well, how do you know what's coming in to see me? Well, there's a reason for that. So John, as brilliant as he was, I would say that his actually outshone by his generosity. So I've known John for 30 years, and honestly, I could probably spend another 30 years even talking about him. There's just so many things that one could say. I've been told I only have 5 minutes, so I'll try to use some of that off. So I'd like to give a couple of some of stories about John that I think have exemplify his demeanor, his personality, his brilliance. So back at the American Health Foundation, as it was mentioned, it was a scientific organization that had some issues. And the director of the place, the president of this place, was this guy, world famous German scientist, a really tough guy, really rough, sort of a stereotypical, you think of a German professor, you know, with this thick German accent, never said a kind word about anybody, no one liked him. So one time I was in the Valhalla laboratories and I was coming back to New York City and coming in a car with Dr. Winder. And so at American Health Foundation there are about 15 or so principal scientists. So Dr. Winder proceeded to give his opinion on all the scientists who were working there. And none of his opinions, he didn't have a nice opinion about anybody. So he started from A to Z, he went down the list. I'm sitting here in the car with this guy. And he'd say things like, that guy, you know, he's really lazy. And this person, he can't think outside the box. And this person's not going to get anywhere. On he went. So finally, the last person on the list, of his list of people to talk about, was John. And then he said, Richie, his thick German accent. He sat there and thought about it for a second, and he didn't say anything. He says, Richie's okay. So he did more than that. Carol, you know, it's funny, I just met Carol for the first time, and so John always said great things about you. And actually, Carol's a brilliant artist, and so John used to keep a wooden sculpture of yours in his room, along with pictures of all his family members and students and his friends. So, kind of, again, you go into John's office, and the thing that would strikes you first off is his relationships with other people. So I'd like to leave one last story here. Probably my time is up. But it was mentioned that, so one of the things that John was really well known for is this aging research. And in particular, as I mentioned, he kind of pioneered the work on glutathione, which is a compound that's thought to be really important for aging. So John started out in his graduate studies as part of his dissertation work. He was doing work on glutathione. And the way he set up his laboratory was that sort of the perfect model to study this of animal models, the mosquito model, because it's really cheap, and you're a graduate student, you do cheap experiments, and you breed a lot of them, and they don't live that long. So John was sort of discovering sort of fundamental aspects about how glutathione may be really critical in healthy aging. And it was something that gained a lot of interest, and in fact, there was a newspaper article about it. And so John was interviewed for it. John was telling me that you know, it was published, but the reaction to it wasn't as good as he was expected, and some of you may know the story, particularly family members. And the reason for that was because the title of this article was "Scientist Figures Out How to Make Mosquitoes Live Longer." So I can tell you honestly, I could go on for 30 years about John, but I don't have the opportunity, and so I have more to appreciate have the opportunity to speak with all of you one-on-one. I've had the fortune of sitting in the same room with him for almost 30 years. He's made my career, his utter brilliance has allowed me to do the things that I want to do. I don't know what I've been doing without him. It's been a great joy and pleasure working with him, the Richie family, and thank you for letting me speak today.
Everybody, I'm Tom Spratt. I basically grew up in science with John, not as long as Mike. I met John in 1987. I moved to the foundation right when the Mets won the World Series, and that was the high point of our sports interactions with each other. Since then, I've been a Met fan and a Jet fan. He's been a Red Sox fan, a Patriot fan. But really, with the compassion of John, he was always very nice to me. He said, you know, if I had a second team root for, it would be the Jets. Didn't really believe him, but he was just nice to the core. You know, he was such a nice guy. You know, he's a very, very nice guy. So we, you know, growing up in science, and one thing, if anybody wants to do mosquito research, John still has those nets in storage, so you can actually use them. So come up, my wife Lisa knows exactly where they are. If you want to do this research, well, he never did anything about it. So we had grown up together. We were like first grants, not get that next grant. We raged at the scientific study sections for not understanding our research, you know, that type of thing. We went through the best together. He was like so calm, so collected, let me rant. He actually never really ranted. He was always so calm. He was always, the glass was half full. Not half empty, half full. And he was like a role model to me in all of these things. He always cared about a lot of other people. His science, he has over 170 publications, but it really wasn't that easy. Because getting grants is really, really hard, and especially his aging research. The thing I liked most about what he was doing was this methionine restriction. Now, if you know, methionine is one of the essential amino acids, and scientists before noticed that when people's restricted diet, you live longer. And maybe this is how those mosquitoes live longer, because their diet was restricted. But what John noticed was that just restricting this one amino acid could do the trick. And that was always what's fascinating me about what his research was. It's hard to get funded because it was like too out of the box. Maybe that's why Winder liked him. He thought out of the box. But, you know, he worked and worked and worked hard and hard to get this going. And I don't think he's ever gotten funded by the NIH, but this is kind of the research I think he does with this Orange Train Foundation. So he melded together lots of different monies. And throughout his career, that's what he always did. He had a group of really terrific scientists working for him. And I know his major goal was maybe not to publish, but actually to keep these people working and employed and together. So he was thinking about that more than his own, you know, not getting his papers published. He was always thinking about getting money for his people to work with. He was always thinking about somebody else. He was always a great person to talk to. When I was, sometime in the 1990s, I got a divorce, and I had to move out of my house. He was the man I called home. He was the one who was the biggest friend I had at the time. John was always thinking about his, you know, when together, two men, we don't really talk feelings. We kind of interact with each other and we feel each other as we go along in life. Although we did talk about our children. And let me tell you, he was so proud of both of you. You're both totally different people. Thought you were the most brilliant person in the world. Nick, you could fix anything. He was so amazingly proud of you guys. And you can see that kind of, in the last days of his life, you know, thinking more about his family than he was about you. Because, you know, John and Lynn like role models for bad time of life. But, you know, you go in with him to some of those appointments. And right before he knew it was the glioblastoma, he said, you know, whatever it is, it is. It's like, how can I say it to myself? How can I just say that without breaking down in tears? That's what I was thinking inside. So, John was so calm, so even killed. Once when a group of us friends were out playing basketball. John loved basketball. Actually, on basketball, John was very, very generous. He loved to hold the ball up and pass it to me, but not if I was there, only if I went back and forth 5 or 6 times. John was really good at getting me in shape. Also, when I used to guard John a lot, because we were about the same size, he was better than me. And he usually faked, and I came down on top of him. And I said, oh, sorry, John. He says, no, I'm sorry, I was in your way. So, very kind that way. And like sometime it was in the 1990s, we were playing basketball. Lynn was there. And we were playing with a group of men and women playing together. And I'm not very coordinated. Anyway, I was driving in the lane, and there comes Lynn. She comes out there and takes the charge. It wasn't like taking a charge. I mean, I hit her, she slammed, I don't know how to do what I had. And I'm thinking, oh, what's John going to do now? But first he goes over to Lynn very calmly. He says, oh, Lynn, learn how to take a charge better than that. So, I mean, John was, I've never heard him say a bad thing about anybody. And he's, you know, you find role models all over the place, and he's one of them too.
Here.
Well, I didn't start by echoing something that Tom said about baseball. John used to tell me if he had a second team to root for, it would be the Yankees. So it was a kind of a thing with him. Well, thank you all for inviting me to come up here and speak. And I have some, well, my name is Neil. I worked with John since 2014. I knew him back in New York when he was at the American Health Foundation. I have a few stories to tell that reinforce, I think, what a lot of the people here have been saying so far. One of them happened this week, caused me to think about John and remember him. Some of our research, or a lot of our research in the last few years has been with smoking. We have smoking machines, 2 smoking machines, and we dose the mice with them. And, years ago, the older smoking machine wasn't working. It was like sucking smoke back into it. So I went down with John to look at it. He looked at it, we took it apart, he looked at it, thought about it, and he said, let's clean it and let's try re-greasing it with a different kind of grease. So we did that. They worked. So this week, actually yesterday, our new smoking machine wasn't working. It wasn't drawing any smoke. So we tried it like a dozen different things. Nothing seemed to work, even greasing. But then I went home and I thought about it, and I thought about John. I thought about that incident years ago. And I said, well, it's got to be the grease. So I went back, I cleaned it, I re-greased it like a little different way than we usually do. We over-grease, and sure enough, it worked. So John was a smart guy. And so, like I said, we were friends at the American Health Foundation. We played basketball and some pickup hockey games with others. He was a good person to play ball with and to hang out with. He was kind and friendly with a sharp sense of humor, and sometimes some sharp elbows. And like I said, he was smart. He could poke fun at himself. He was humble. He'd like to tell this story when he was at Louisville. Somehow he found himself in a pickup basketball game with some of the University of Louisville college players. One of whom was Darryl Griffith, who went on to have a very excellent NBA career. So there's John, somehow standing in front of the basket. And here comes Darryl Griffith down the court, right at John. Talk about charge. And so John liked to say, well, Darryl didn't go around me. He didn't try to go through me. He literally jumped over to the basket. I loved hearing that story, and John loved telling it. I would ask him about it every once in a while. Tell me the story about Darryl. So John was he was always John. He always had the great qualities that I mentioned before, kind, friendly, and everything. When my old boss, Bogdan, left, he retired, he made sure that the person I would work for after him was John, and he couldn't have made a better choice. John had many passions, starting with his family and friends. He loved his work, his research, tinkering with things, cooking, working outdoors in the yard, and sports. We traded like a lot of good-natured barbs over the years about the Yankees and the Red Sox, and he loved all his Boston teams, especially his beloved Red Sox. And he was in heaven when they beat the Yankees in 2004, but he felt cheated because he had just moved to Pennsylvania, and he couldn't rub it into us New Yorkers. He had to wait till we moved down to Pennsylvania to rub it into us. So he did feel cheated about that. His passion for his work and his caring for the people who work for him showed in many ways. He worked hard to get grants and stay funded. He was involved in so many projects and collaborations. His topics as aging, diet, and the effects of smoking and exposure to e-cigarettes on health. During COVID, when everything seemed to be coming apart, he made sure that we were all deemed essential personnel so that we could remain full-time. And he had weekly meetings to try to keep the group together, and it worked. And I told him that I appreciate what he did, and I'm glad I was able to tell him that. John had a wonderful way of talking to people so he could make his point while still acknowledging the other's point of view. He and I, we did get into a few serious back and forth discussions over the last couple of years, but it was work, and there were no hard feelings about it. He actually enjoyed it, I think. He had a talent for looking at complicated and difficult to interpret data and to see how things and to present things in a way that could form the basis of a publication. I'm glad he considered me not just a colleague, but also a friend. John, myself, and Lynn, we shared many nice dinners and fun Sundays watching football together. I could say more, but I'll end with like this little story, this little anecdote. First, I'll preface it with a little story from MASH. I don't know if older people here probably know about the TV show MASH, show about doctors in the Korean War. Younger people may not be familiar with it. But anyway, there's this one episode where the main character, Hawkeye, is trying to get his friend BJ to tell him, what does BJ stand for? What does your name mean? And BJ, always kind of gives him this sly smile and says, anything you want, Hawk, anything you want. So every Christmas, John would give me a card or a gift, and I would give him a card. And then we go through this little ritual. I would say, John, I can never remember how to spell Lynn's name. Could you please tell me how to spell Lynn's name again? And John would look at me and give me that same kind of sly smile, a big smile that he had. And I don't know if he was thinking of MASH or not, but he would say, you can spell it any way you want. Spell it any way you want. She'll get the message. And so that was John. He was very cool in very, very many ways. And it was great to be his friend and his colleague. And like all of us, I'm sorry that his life was cut short this way. There's so much more to do. But anyway, thank you for listening.
Next up, we're going to hear from Jeff Babushkin, followed by Lisa Campbell.
So my name is Jeff, and I went to graduate school with John at University of Louisville. And how I first met, I'm going to talk a little bit how I first met John. It was a strange set of circumstances that actually brought me to Louisville. And I say strange because the interview that I had in 1980 was set up by the department chair, who happened to be a good friend of my wife's father. And so I get to Louisville, And at the time, I was in the Department of Microbiology at the University of Miami, and I was trying to get into graduate school in the Department of Microbiology. And I get there, and the first person I interview with, faculty member, was Dr. Calvin Lang, who happened to be John's mentor, another way known as Cal. And Cal, at that time, I realized that I was interviewing at the Department of Biochemistry and not the Department of Microbiology. So Cal looks at me, and if you've never met Cal, he can be kind of aggressive on the first time I see him. And he looks at me and he goes, "No bullshit." He said, "Why do you want to come here and pursue your graduate studies at the University of Louisville?" And I said, "Well, in all honesty," said, "I thought I was interviewing for the Department of Microbiology." So he looks at me and goes, "Interesting." He said, "You're going to have, if you do come here, I'm going to have to watch you." Then, of course, I interviewed with two other aggressive faculty members, Drs. Gray and Dr. Fonda. At that point, I thought my chances of coming here would be slim to nil. So then, fortunately, there was a break, and I got to meet the graduate students, including John, this strange guy with this New England-style dialect. And we went aside, and we started talking a little bit about baseball. So I went to Miami, and at the time, they had no football team, no basketball team, really. They just had a baseball team. And so he's talking about the Red Sox, I'm talking about the Canes, and he says, goes, "Babushki," he goes, "No one cares about college baseball." So that sort of went on for a while, bantering. And then I said, I started talking about the angst I felt actually when I was interviewing with Dr. Lang. He said, because I know he goes, "I've been working with Dr. Lang, George Hazelton, I have been. I get nervous," and he goes, "When you make a mistake on a protocol, he has you get into this net, and then he had to go into the room at midnight and feed the mosquitoes." We do work with mosquitoes because they have a little fire deficiency, look at aging. And I looked at him and go, "You work with mosquitoes?" He goes, "Yeah." And so he takes me to the hot box, it's like 80 degrees. And he shows me, and inside there's these like gas lanterns and all these mosquitoes inside, and they have to set up a net. And they put pads on top, and they have 10% sucrose to feed them and everything. And he goes, if they do accept you, you're probably going to have to do a rotation. And if you have to do a rotation, you're probably going to have to do one in Dr. Lang's lab. And if you have to do one in Cal's lab, and you make a mistake, they're really dangerous. They're yellow fever mosquitoes. He goes, "You'll have to go in there in the middle of the night and the net and everything and feed him." He's very compassionate and sincere about it. He's concerned in his face. And then he goes, "But don't worry, if you get infected, I've got medication." So, come to find out that when I was accepted a couple of years later, that the medication he showed me were actually blood pressure medication. Unbelievable and everything. So and that's the type of guy that John was, very concerned about fellow graduate students, and very sincere and good guy. And I remember, then my name became Bushmaster General, because I don't know, he couldn't say Bishkin. He would come in at the most inopportune times and ask me what I was doing in the lab, and then he would like to pick up my keys and throw them into the trash can. And all the time, there were many times that I actually left the university without my keys. But John was very organized, as people have talked about, and there would be 3 floors of the Health Sciences Center. We had the Health Sciences Center, all of the anatomy, physiology, pharmacology were on one side. We'd have the library here, the medical school here, the dental school here. They had a nice area in between to play volleyball. And John decided when we came downstairs, at each floor we would have beer in the cold room. Iron City beer, it was like $5, you get a case and you take it back, deposit and everything. And so he'd bring him, I had a beer, he came up. Well, we're not supposed to talk about that already. And then he came up, and then we'd see, he goes, "Look," he goes, "you guys not do anything? Kind of like to play wheelchair basketball." And I said, what's wheelchair basketball? So he said, well, get all the chairs together, he goes, and we'll just roam around and we'll just shoot baskets and shoot paper into the trash. And we started playing this. And this went on for a while. It was a great game. We played this all the time and everything. We're doing this at nighttime, of course, and there's glass here. So, you can't really see out, but people can see in. So one day, we after playing, we were sitting down studying, and the security comes upstairs. And they come around and they go, we were called up here because it looked like some people were accosting each other. And John, being John, looks up to the guy and goes, we're dedicated graduate students in science, we're not the medical students. So that's a little bit about John, the God humor he had, and what a great person he was, and I'm so glad I went to graduate school because I never would have met him and his lovely wife Lynn and family. So thank you.
So when I was thinking about doing this and getting my thoughts together, I didn't stop to think about how many people were going to be here, which was really dumb on my part because, of course, everybody is going to be here for John because we all loved him. My name is Lisa. I worked with John back in the early 1990s at the American House Foundation. John has the distinction of being my very favorite boss of all time. And I have the distinction of giving him his nickname, John the Wonderful. And in turn, he called me the Fleece Machine. Now, my family nickname was Fleesa, which is where the first part of that comes in. But the second part is because Ike was so speedy and precise with the glutathione assay. He said I was like a machine. So he said, you're a machine. And I said, you're a wonder. And that was how we related with each other. It's a very shared sentiment of everyone who's ever worked with him that he was the best boss. He was a wonderful teacher and mentor, and I think I was one of his first mentees. And I can say from first-hand experience that it was not just his brilliance that made him a wonderful mentee. It was his kindness and his loving and the fact that he cared about all people, but especially the people he loved. He was my favorite boss, but he was my friend. Most importantly, was my friend. Since he was my friend, and in my early 20s, I have lots of stories. I'm not going to share too many of them. The first one I want to tell you, though, is the one and only time John ever failed me. One. We worked at the American Health Foundation, and we were a tight-knit group of people. We spent a lot of time in and out of work together, hanging out. And in that group was Tom, who you've heard from already. And they were both had their own labs, and they were looking to hire someone at the same time. So since I spent so much time with these guys, I suggested that they hire somebody I could go out with, because opportunities were slim with all the people who were already there. So John hired this kid named Alex, who I hated. We just did not get along. Of course, John liked Alex, but I did not like him one bit. So I was disappointed, that John failed me, but Tom had John's back because Tom hired my husband, Tom. So that all worked out. I forgave him. I'm going to tell this next story for John because this was his favorite story to tell about me. So I will carry it on for him. A group of us were coming home from New York City. we had gone to see a music, a band in the city, and I think Lynn may have been with us, and this is why I think you were here. We all got in the car, John was driving us home. We all got in the car, and we all passed out immediately, and, you know, Lynn likes to sleep, so I climbed right in the back seat and went to sleep. I decided I wouldn't go to sleep, I would stay awake, and I would keep John company. And it turned into a very long-winded recitation of the history of New York radio. And he was very nice. He, you know, he listened, and he really wanted me to shut up and go to sleep. But he listened, and he did tease me about that for pretty much the rest of our lives. I'm just skipping ahead here, okay. So John and Lynn were not from New York, which is where we were all living, so they made their family out of their from their friends. And I, of course, was very lucky, and my husband Colin, very lucky to be part of that family. They did travel a lot. Once they bought their house, they traveled a lot. And we would go house sit and dog sit. We watched Zoe for them. And we only ever had one party without them there. we had a couple parties with them there, but we had one with them. They were aware of the fact we were having. So I think I may have skipped something, so let me go back. Okay, I'm just going to skip ahead. Okay. Well, so when John and Lynn started growing their own family, when we got Nick, I was one of the two people lucky enough to go to the airport and pick them up. And I think Nick grew up knowing me as the woman who was holding the camcorder that shook as they got off the plane, because I was filming them, and I was so happy and so excited to meet him and to welcome him to the family. In the mid-90s, I did leave the lab and I got married. John and Lynn were there, got married, moved to New Jersey. So we didn't see each other as much as we would have liked to, and then they eventually moved down here, and so there's probably, we were in touch, but there's probably, I think it was about 10 years I hadn't seen John and Lynn. And it was around 2016, and I was coming down here to go to a play with Tom and Lisa and their daughter. And I had my daughter with me, and I met them at a restaurant, and Lisa said, "Oh, John and Lynn are coming." I invited John and Lynn, and I was so excited. But I had to go to the bathroom because I had just driven down to New Jersey. So I go into the bathroom, and I can hear John and Lynn coming in. And they're reintroducing themselves to my daughter because they haven't seen her in many years. And I just remember coming out of the bathroom and running over to John and giving him a big hug, and he held on to me so tight. And I was so happy to be with him again. And it was one of those hugs where you step back and you look at the other person, and then you go back in for more hug. And that was how I felt about John, being with John. We had a great time that night. We laughed, and I think subsequently we did one or two more times. Maybe I was down here and I was able to visit, to go out to dinner and have a lot of laughs, a lot of good times. I was also fortunate enough to be able to come see him twice over the last 4 months when he was ill. And I'm grateful I was able to spend that time with him and to talk to him and to tell him how important he was to me. And so I'm going to leave you with how I would leave John when I left him after visiting him. And what I said was, "John, I love you so much, and I will see you later."
building an image in my mind. I just want to share it with you. I guess it's sort of like a memory. It takes place at my grandparents' house. This is what I'm seeing, all right? So my grandparents' house was a small kitchen, all right? There's a dinner table. It's pulled out from the wall. It's set for 6. My grandmother has enough food for 12, but she's afraid that there's only enough food for 5. There's pasta sauce. It's got tomatoes from the garden. Inside of it, there's brajol, there's meatballs. Next to that, there's water. It's boiling, it's waiting for linguine. It's rolled out thin, right? It's homemade. There's fruit on the table. Next to that is antipasto. You go into the dining room, that's Italian cookies, sfogliatelle, Italian pastries. You go in the garage, there's pies, there's cake, there's a freezer that's dedicated only to ice cream. Cannolis. My grandfather, he grabs a spoon. He makes his way over to the top of the sauce. And he puts it in the sauce. And my grandmother stops. She holds her hands like this. Everybody goes quiet. My grandfather, he tastes the sauce. One stops. And he comes back. He has a pinch of salt, just a little salt. Like a baby's tear of salt. And he puts it over the sauce. And he drops it. And he goes, Rose, it's perfect. So, you save a cup of water from the pasta. We're draining the rest of it out into the colander. And all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. The doorbell's for company, right? There's a knock on the door. Ah, it's Johnny. Johnny's home early. Yeah. I want to thank you guys so much for coming. It meant so much to me. It meant so much to the family. It just meant so much to everybody I spoke with tonight. You know, my Uncle John would tell you first, he was a very fortunate man. He was so proud of Nick and Marina. He loved everybody so much. Him and my Aunt Lynn were partners. I like to view them from like the Wild West. But looking at all of you today, meeting so many of you for the first time, you are proof of how fortunate he truly was. We'd love you guys to eat with us. We're going to be meeting at What If of Hershey. It's about 10 minutes away on 845 Charlotte Ave. Thank you, Chocolate Ave. Thank you so much again for coming. It meant a lot. Wonderful.